In the coming decade, more than 50% of jobs will be disrupted by technology.
Some will change dramatically, others will disappear completely.
Replaced by new jobs that haven't even been invented yet.
2.4 million jobs will be added to the Canadian economy in the next 4 years.
Human skills will be essential for nearly all of them.
Skills such as critical thinking, complex problem solving, and social perceptiveness.
21st century skills too, like analytics, digital fluency, and cultural awareness.
These skills empower youth to pivot between careers and across sectors.
But we are not ready.
In a world of work that's changing at warp speed, we need to connect a new generation.
What if 100% of post-secondary students had a meaningful work-integrated learning experience?
What if employers agree to hire for core skills over credentials?
What if foundational skills and career planning were emphasized starting in grade school?
What if, together, we recognize the common skills revolution as critical to Canada's future?
I was an HR professional, and now I'm a software developer.
I was a lawyer, now I'm an entrepreneur.
I was a data collection technician, and now I'm an apprentice carpenter.
I was an engineer, now I'm a regional director in healthcare services.
Good morning and welcome to a special edition of RBC Disruptors. I'm John Stackhouse and it's my pleasure to host our monthly conversation about innovation, disruption, and how technology is changing everything around us. We're joined this morning by a public audience on Facebook Live, so welcome everyone out there, and to thousands of RBCers around the world via webcast to talk about disruption and the world of work. As we've seen, and you've probably seen, or we've shown in our new report, Humans Wanted, our economy may need more people than ever, but with a different mix of skills, some old, some new. And to get us started, we're joined by a special guest, RBC CEO Dave McKay, who will kick us off with his perspective on the changing world of work. Dave, thanks for spending some time with us this morning.
It's great to be here. I've watched your show for Disruptors for a couple of years now. It's good to actually be here in the audience.
So it's okay.
Successful, yeah. What an important topic.
Well, after some a brief conversation with Dave, I'll be joined on stage by three really interesting organizations to talk about their journey in skills and in innovation. Peller Estates, a third-generation winery, two student entrepreneurs from the University of Guelph who are here with their advisor, and St. Elizabeth Healthcare, the country's largest home care provider. And in each of these cases, as we'll hear, attracting and developing the right skills is core to innovation. And then a programming note at 10 o'clock when the public conversation is finished, I'll be joined back on stage by Dave and Helena Gottschling, our Chief Human Resources Officer, to take your questions and share their perspective on the world of work. Dave, let's get started, kick us off here. Let me start with Future Launch. It's fantastic. A 10-year commitment by RBC under your leadership to the future of youth, $500 million. We've seen the incredible TV commercials inspiring the digital content, the wrappers in branches. What does Future Launch mean to you?
You know, we're very proud of Future Launch, which we announced, I think a year ago now. And as we think about our commitment to communities and living our purpose, which is to help clients thrive and communities prosper, we're only as strong as the strength of our community. Therefore, as you look at how we want to make a difference with our employees, with our financial assets, with the strength and presence that RBC has in the market, we said we can't do everything. Lots of areas Canada's great at, lots of areas Canada needs to be better. But we have to prepare youth for the future, from a skills perspective, from a network and inclusion perspective. So therefore, we made this commitment to say, we've got a lot of challenges in this country, but to work on youth and to help youth get ready to lead this country, to continue our prosperity, to continue to enjoy the quality of life that we've had, we can't just sit back and keep doing the same things we've always done. And we see that from our customers, from the great speakers we're going to have today. So what role can RBC play? We can use our brand and our platform and our role to start the conversation, but we also have to lead. We have to lead from the front. Work integrated learning, other opportunities to make a difference. So focusing on youth and getting youth ready from a skills, from a knowledge, from a network, from a capability perspective to lead this country in the future, I think is how we can ensure that we're around for the next 150 years, or we'll be celebrating our 150th birthday next year, big birthday party. in Halifax, I think, where we started. But certainly we're thinking long term and what can we do for this country.
So in Humans Wanted, you write a letter at the beginning referring to this as a quiet crisis. What do you mean by that?
I think we're changing now, and we sense the change around us, but we're not sure what it means to us. We hear it from, as I travel the world, I hear it from everywhere, from being in Conestoga College a couple of weeks ago and hearing it from students that are there, to being at Davos at the other end with global leaders on the business side and on the government side. All we talked about was how the world's changing, how our businesses are changing, how our employee needs are changing, how do we take 7 billion people with us on this transformational journey that's probably equivalent to the advent of electricity, and how that changed the world and changed business models and changed how we interact. This is just as fundamental. When you think about how data and how information transformed the outcome of Brexit, potentially, allegedly, according to the newspapers, maybe transformed political outcomes and elections, it can certainly transform purchase decisions on goods and services and how we think about the economy. It can transform how the healthcare sector, the education sector, the transportation sector. So as we think about this new world, how do we adapt and how do we bring 7 billion people with us on this journey?
So you travel the country and much of the world, meet with clients, large and small. You hear what they're up against, but also what they're doing in terms of skills and developing the talent of tomorrow. What impresses you out there?
We had that discussion earlier this morning again with the panelists. It's really about defining different business models and different way of serving clients and creating value in society. I mean, I think the first thing that we're seeing incumbents and disruptors do is redefine their business and redefine what it means to make a product or deliver a service, whether it's how they produce that service or ancillary value around that service. And you see that from big companies to small companies, and with that comes a definition of, well, how do I deliver that? What type of people and skills? What interactions do I need? What do my clients need? And what does society need? And I think we're redefining that. So I get really excited when I see businesses step back and say, I'm here today and I have to go here tomorrow. And if I don't go here tomorrow, or at least here, I'm going here. Because someone else is going to perform my service, someone else is going to build my goods, someone else is going to lead society. So therefore, it's really exciting to, at this point in our history, to lead and be part of this transformation that, as our report talks about, Humans Wanted, there is so much need for transformation. And we're going to go through a couple of phases. One, we're going through the figuring out phase, but at the same time, we're going through this transformational phase where we've got a lot of the old world still working away. We're starting to build the new world, so this huge demand for people. And then we're going to destroy some jobs for sure and change them, but we're going to create so many new jobs. So I think we're just starting this huge transformation period. We're going to have a lot of the old, start to build the new, and then transform to the new. So it's an incredibly exciting period. And in that, businesses, governments, institutions are trying to define who they are, what they want to be, and where they're going with what type of skills. So I think it's a magical time to be part of this.
How can we better manage that transition? A lot of people out there are afraid when they hear about automation and what they're up against. What are some of the positive ways we can manage this change?
One thing I've learned leading at different ways within our own organization and watching other leaders and customers is when you're not in control of change, personal control of change, there's fear. And as soon as you empower someone to control and form and shape change, the fear dissipates. And I think that's what we're starting to feel. Am I in control of a driverless truck or a driverless taxi? No, I'm not. But how can I be part of that? And I think that's why we produce this report, is to talk about how do we empower people to take control of change? Because when you sense, you feel you have at least some control, the fear dissipates. I think that's the first thing we have to do. And that's why we produce this report, and that's why we want this national dialogue, is to start getting rid of that fear of the unknown, that fear, will I, won't I have a role? Will I be able to buy a home? Will I have a quality of life in the future? And I think the answers are yes, but not if you stay in a static mode. We have to get into more of a dynamic, skills-based mode. Career streams that I started with, where you go into a legal profession, a medical profession, a banking profession, whatever it happens to be, are very defined careers. If you do well and you progress through this vertical, you'll have a good life. And increasingly, it's hard to say you're going to have such a well-defined vertical of banking or legal or medical. There's going to be more horizontal skills. And we're going to talk about that today. And the report puts that out. And we're going to have to be flexible and dynamic as people and as a culture. I think at the end of the day, it's going to be more work than we can handle with our demographic profile that we have today. But we want to start this dialogue and recognize from secondary institutions through to post-secondary institutions through to employers, we have to engage with governments in reshaping education to work, and the interaction between the two can't be a handoff after defined 8-year or 10-year periods. It has to be an interaction throughout the educational process with business and governments to shape learning and to shape experience. Because the way we've done of transferring knowledge from an educational institution to a person generationally, so we do. You go into science, you go into engineering, and our job is to program the next generation with the basic knowledge of our society, and then their job is to grow that knowledge through experimentation and learning. Well, wait a second, we're programming computers once for that base knowledge. We don't really need to transfer that to 1 billion people every generation. So how do you take that knowledge and build on it and create value and transform our society and accelerate that transformation and quality of life? I think that's the huge opportunity that's in front of us, and that's the dialogue that we have to have with the educational institutions, governments, and businesses, and I think it's an exciting journey.
So on the topic of education, what's the one thing you'd change about our approach to education? Maybe focus on post-secondary where you spend a lot of time?
I think we can shorten the actual in-classroom cycle and get more students out into work, integrated learning experiences, and mix the two. And I think it accelerates the knowledge gain, it accelerates the application of skills. I sat down with the dean of Oxford University Business School in Davos. We only spent 15 minutes. That's what you do in Davos. You have 15 minutes, you have a coffee, no chit chat. Bang, 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 okay, gone. Next one. But in 15 minutes, he said, I'm taking my 4-year degree down to 2. But you're paying for 4, and I'll deliver those 4 sometimes over the next 15 years. You're going to come back for 4 months here and there, and I'm going to upgrade your skills as the world changes. So I want 4 years tuition, but I'm going to deliver 2 up front. I'm going to get you in the workforce. I'm going to bring you back, and we're going to train you very differently in the future. You're not going to have to invest 4 or 6 years up front before you start earning income. I think that's closer to the world. We have to take that right back into high school and guide people. So I think this integration of how do we develop these skills for the future is fundamentally different than, I think, what I went through as a student and had a lot of fun doing it. It was expensive because it drained your cash flow and you were pretty poor coming out of it. But I don't think it's going to work as well this time around.
We've got just a minute left, and then we'll hear more from you and Helena later. But how do we create a greater sense of urgency both in society and within organizations?
I think the very definition of leadership is creating change when times are good and people don't see it. I mean, it's actually pretty easy as a leader to come into a crisis and say, hey, there's a big fire, let's put it out, and let's rebuild the structure. I mean, that is actually the easier part of leadership. The harder part is, boy, times are good, and times are good now. We need to change. What we did to make us great today isn't going to make us great tomorrow. And to create an awareness of that within an organization, even RBC is tough, but we're doing it, and we're being bold about that change to say, hey, we're doing really well, and we are doing really well. Looked at our Q1 results we just released and last year. But we don't think everything we did to make us great today is going to make us great tomorrow. So we're going through a bold cultural transformation in the organization, a skills transformation. We're having open dialogue with different roles within the organization and some frontline roles where things are changing. And this is how we think this role is going to evolve. What's the customer-facing role going to look like in 2020 or 2025? It's different than today. Fear. Anxiety, phase 1, 2, oh, you're going to help train me. Okay, I understand where we're going. I have some control over this journey. If I do these 3 things, I'll compete for this role. So understanding how can you take control of that. So I think all of those are things that, as we think about the journey, how do you do that at a national level? Because if we do it at RBC, we have to work. So we're working with the Business Council of Canada. We're working with the provincial government, with the federal government. We're talking about how do you build programs? How do we create this dialogue? We at RBC think we start with this report and we get it out there and we use our platform to create an awareness. We're interacting with governments. I'm leading through the Business Higher Education Roundtable a commitment to create 100% of undergrads from colleges and universities will get an apprenticeship or co-op opportunity in Canada. That's our goal. We feel confident in reaching that. It means we have to create 150 to 200,000 per year, an increase in the number of placements. And my job is to go around and sell that to my peers across the country, to create those roles, to work with educational institutions, to say, you have to release people. I can't find 200,000 roles from May to August, as much as people would like to work the summer. Some of them are going to be January to March. Some of them are going to be September to December. Some of them are going to be in Barcelona. Some of them are going to be here. You as an education institution have to reprogram to allow your students to integrate into this world. And guess what? I think the students will demand it at the end of the day if they have this opportunity. So I think it's these types of things that we have to do. I could go on all day, but I know we want to get our guests up there.
These are great insights. We're going to get you back on stage and talk lots more about this. But Dave, thanks for your time. Thanks for your leadership for all of Canada in this. It's fantastic. As I say, Dave's going to join us with Helena at 10 o'clock, but now we're going to turn to hear from some other organizations, starting with Peller Estates. We'll cue the video. Thanks.
My name's John Peller, and I'm the chairman and CEO of Andrew Peller Limited. My family's been in the wine business for almost 60 years. Here in a vineyard where we 40 years ago did everything with a wheelbarrow and a shovel and a hoe. We are inspired with weather stations. We have drones, probes in the ground. We're bringing in data, by the second to help us make great decisions every day of the year.
Hi, I'm Emma Garner. I'm the winemaker at 30 Bench Winemakers. Some unexpected skills that I transferred from university to my career currently would be interacting with people and being collaborative.
Effective winemakers have to be as knowledgeable about business as an MBA. They have to understand software, IT, and new technological developments, and they have to have exemplary leadership skills.
John and Emma, thank you for doing the video and for joining us here at RBC Disruptors.
Thanks for having us.
Do we have the mics on? I think you might have to flip a switch on them.
Hello, RBC. Bravo.
There we are. So technology is disrupting everything around us, including these conversations. John, it's and Emma, it's such a pleasure to have you here, and amazing to see what you're doing in your business. We've got just 15 minutes with you, but want to get to some quick questions. John, your grandfather started the company, and you're transforming it. You've got a great line that winemakers in your grandfather's time were more like Monet, and today they're like Einstein. And Emma's your Einstein. 10 years from now, are robots going to be making wine?
Well, we've already got robots into our production facilities already, helping us with packaging and the like, but it's safe to say when you look at a winery today, it will look like a winery in the past, beautiful pastoral vineyards and cellars, an inviting place to come and taste wine and meet people, but behind the scenes, we're a lot of technical data and learning to help us right from the vineyard through supply chain and logistics and how we reach our consumers. We are overwhelmed with data, and it's helping us be smarter, make decisions more quickly. And our business is a hugely expensive capital business. When I started, a vineyard was 28 years ago, $1,000 in Niagara. We're paying $150,000 for an acre now, and every vine and clone that we plant and how we farm that plant and understand the microclimate is critical to us making a better product more cost effectively.
And you're relying on talent like Emma. Emma, you grew up in a small town, Ontario, decided to go into winemaking after studying science. Maybe give us a brief insight into the skills that you're using today that you didn't learn in school. We saw in the video use of drones and sensors in the soils. It's transformed almost completely. What's different for you as a winemaker?
I think some of the main skills that we've learned to embrace, not only are there the technical skills and realizing that technology is changing at warp speed and being able to embrace it instead of being intimidated by it or being fearful of it, allowing it to guide us to make better decisions because we have that information. That certainly wasn't as focused upon 15, 20 years ago when I was in school. I don't like to do the math on that, but that's the truth of the matter. And then obviously the soft skills that you develop once you are in the industry, and it's so important realizing how connected we are, so be it between our vineyard teams to our cellar teams to fellow winemakers and just essentially the world of wine as a whole. It's so fast, everything moves, and that exchange of information is so realizing how it can be relevant to your world and not just living in a little silo making wine by yourself and focusing on your own art, realizing that there's a great big world out there and you can take advantage of it and use it in your own backyard.
So let's talk a bit about the skills that you're looking for. John, it's amazing to see on your website, one of the first things that pops up is we're hiring. You are hiring, but you need different kind of people to make all that capital, to leverage all that capital that you've got in the land and in the operations. What kind of people are you looking for? What kind of skills?
Smart, capable people. No, clearly, you know, essentially all business is a human sport, right? And you beat other businesses by having people who are smarter, more capable, and work well together. So that, you know, in our marketing department where we used to have a brand manager, an associate marketing manager, you know, we have a team of 25 business intelligence managers, have a broad scope and specific marketing skills as well. So that, you know, broadly we're hiring people who are more technically competent, but we're more interested in how well they relate to people, how well they work in a team, how well they communicate, so that, you know, our critical thinking skills and execution skills go up at the same time.
And Emma, you're a grad from Brock University in St. Catharines, and you're working with the co-op program there, helping students, but also bringing in a lot of those students into your operation. Give us some insight into how the co-op program benefits Peller and what you're looking for from the students and what you're trying to develop in them as they're spending time with you.
So pulling from my own life experience and realizing some of the shortcomings of just looking at the academic world to rely upon and remaining competitive out in the job force, realizing some of the things that I've obtained throughout the years, and again coming down to those interpersonal skills and realizing how important it is to not only know how to make wine, because that essentially process has not changed, but all of the things that feed into it have. So if you have a strong core team, strong core values, realizing that there's many different ways to get to that end product, but realize that that end goal should be the same. And within our co-op program, not only do we employ local interns, but they have an opportunity to work alongside with some of the international interns that we hire as well. And although they're working for one of the big wineries in the region, they realize that Canada's a very small player in the world of wine, if you will. So making those connections internationally, they get a sense for that. But they also make some connections that they can develop themselves as winemakers or just help contribute back to our wine region when they go and get these experiences internationally. So helping to forge those relationships and put them together.
That's so critical to helping all of us, but especially youth coming into the workforce. What a big opportunity the world is. Canada's a very tiny part of the world, and the more they can connect. I mean, you're bringing in people from New Zealand and Australia to work seasonally, as I understand it, and connecting Brock students with those is a fantastic opportunity.
Absolutely, and as a benefit for us, having students come in to work, they've got a fresh set of eyes, a new perspective, and us remaining open to what they have to say and helping us learn from the new technologies that are out there as well. It also really helps strengthen our relationship with Brock University because they're such great advocates for research and improving the quality of wine for the industry as a whole, obviously not just for our winery, but realizing that together, if we make better wine, and we're more recognized on the global stage.
So, John, Dave had a great question for you as we were off stage about whether all this automation is improving the quality of wine.
I mean, 100% certain that we are, and you know, when
Machines
you look at,
make better wine than people do?
they help people make better wine.
Right.
So we have GPS weather stations on all our vineyards. So on a 50-acre vineyard, you know, we want to know the heat and airflow in every segment of the vineyard, where the water saturation is the best, how air moves across the vineyard, because we'll plant maybe 4 different types of Chardonnay, different clones, different rootstocks to maximize how that plant can grow and give us quality. You mentioned sensors and drones. Like, this is a very technical environment. Emma does this all on her cell phone in terms of tracking data real time so that we know when to harvest, when ripeness happens. And, you know, it's an exciting environment for us to make better wine. And by the way, I mean, I'm 100% confident we make wine as good as anybody in the world. And the fact that we're getting better at it every day gives me a lot of confidence for our future.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic what you've been doing. Emma, give us some brief insight into what you do with your phone, because it's fascinating how you can now run the vineyard, probably while you're sitting up here or in the audience from
pruning
your phone.
as we speak. Yeah,
Sorry?
I'm pruning
speak.
as we speak. No, essentially for us, we have, as John was saying, various weather stations throughout our vineyard, which I can access from my phone, so I can see, helps me make decisions. So, say we've got a potential winter event, which essentially is where the temperatures dip so low that we are at a risk of losing our vines because they can't sustain the temperatures. So we're able to analyze the wind speed. Is it a safe time to turn on the wind machines? Is there an inversion layer between the temperature at ground level versus at 60 meters in the air? Does it make sense to turn them on? Because obviously there's a cost involved in that as well, but that's maybe a small cost when you think about the potential for losing all of your vines. Not only all the replant costs, but also not having that fruit to work with for the season. So it's giving us that sort of data that we can look and access all the time. For our cellar team as well, like moving to cloud-based systems, so instead of using paper work tickets within the cellars, there's real-time processing of when that wine was moved from tank A to tank B and what the loss was, and being able to use that information to decrease losses and to increase our bottom line.
It's fascinating, the reason we wanted to have you share your story with us today. It's fascinating how you're using technology in all these incredible ways, but this isn't replacing people. It's augmenting what people are doing, and you're needing to shift people. And I wonder, as we move to close, if you can help us understand how you're helping your current workforce shift. Emma, we've talked about some of the optical sensors you're bringing in. That used to be a human job of spotting the grapes that weren't quite right. Now there's machines that do that. You still need the people, but need them doing different things. How do you help people on that journey make that transition and improve your business at the same time?
I think essentially it's, again, mitigating some of those fears that the technology is not job stealing, it's more job enhancing. So it's now freeing up the time that you were doing a menial task, looking at berries, trying to make that judgment call. There are sensors that can do that. So it's freeing up your time to use your human skills to actually devise new processes, use your senses to evaluate wine and to taste wine and to make better wine and to make those personal connections with fellow winemakers and just, again, create that community and together form a really strong core group that can't be done through technology, and keeping the human element still alive and well, and keeping everyone's senses in the game, because that's essentially something that the technology can't replace.
And how do you help people make that transition? Because they probably can't do it just on their own.
No, it's guiding, obviously, and helping, again, to mitigate some of the fears. But there's, we're working with one of the teachers at Niagara College to help develop modules to train our pre-existing cellar teams. So obviously the experience of that cellar team, they know our processes better than anyone else, but giving them the tools to realize essentially why we're doing what we're doing to make wine, but also some of the new technologies that are out there so they can understand better why they're coming, why they're important, and how that's going to help them do their job.
And John, as you look into the future, into the 2020s, what concerns you most, what excites you most about what you can do with your workforce of today and tomorrow?
I mean, the first question we ask people whenever we meet with them in our company is, are you learning as fast as this world is changing? And for me, it's all about creating a culture of learning and growing in our company, not as individuals, but as a team. And it's easy for individuals to go off and study and learn, but for an entire team to learn at a pace that helps it get its job done, that's something totally different. You know, the mountain climbing team travels exactly as fast as the slowest person on the rope. So, you know, we talk about not performance appraisals anymore, we talk about learning and training sessions. And we use more specific technical training, but we want more cooperative learning as well. And we definitely emphasize team skills, collaborative communication. You need to be a team member 1 minute, and you need to be leading a team the next. So somehow drawing all those things together is what will keep a company successful in the future.
It's terrific what you're doing, not just for your company, but leading an important region of the country and really establishing a Canadian champion in a very competitive global stage, also helping a great education institution in Brock and also in Niagara College. So thank you for that. Great story, which you can hear in full if you want to listen to our podcast. You can get it on iTunes and SoundCloud with John and Emma. Just search for RBC Disruptors. Emma and John, thanks so much for spending time with us today.
Thanks for having us. Come join us for a glass of wine.
You got the invitation there. Peller's a short drive from Toronto. We're now going to turn our attention to our next guest, the University of Guelph and the Arrell Food Institute. Thank you both.
Thank you.
So agriculture right now is on the cusp of a revolution, and it's a digital revolution. And the same technologies that brought us the internet and are transforming medicine are being applied in our fields and in our barns and our food processing plants.
This has brought opportunities to build knowledge translation skill sets. So, on our team we have environmental scientists, we have an engineer, we have a plant agriculture and a nutrition expert.
Working in the STEM field, I do see a lot of people that are very knowledgeable and that are very able to produce very strong research. However, they're not always able to communicate their ideas. What I'm excited by is to develop my own skills of communication so that I can really underscore the importance not only of what I'm doing in my research, but of what I'm doing in every aspect of what I bring to the business.
The work world demands immediately that you work in interdisciplinary teams on projects, yet we give students very little chance to practice that. So at the Arrell Food Institute, we're trying to re-engineer programs in order to put project management and interdisciplinary teamwork at the front and accessing knowledge as something the student can do essentially on their own.
Evan, Leah, Amberley, thanks so much for joining us, and great video there. It's wonderful to see what you're doing at Guelph, but at the Arrell Food Institute. Evan, let's start with you. You've been teaching for, I think it's about 15 years now.
You can do the math.
Like since before the iPhone. How has the classroom changed?
Well, it's changed a lot, or we're trying to change it a lot. At the beginning of my career, we still, at the undergrad level, had the paradigm of the prof in the classroom giving the lecture and students regurgitating that on an exam or an essay. Grad school, an original piece of research that results in a peer-reviewed journal article. Today, as we've learned already this morning, the demands of the workplace are very different. We need to be helping students gain those interpersonal critical thinking, project management skills, which they currently aren't trained in. And so what we're trying to do with the Arrell Food Institute at the University of Guelph is create a space specifically for grad students to do that training.
So this is amazing, and we'll turn to Leah and Amberley and hear about the business that you're building. Maybe you can just describe the business, and then we'll come back to Evan to hear a bit about the logic of how this fits into the academic environment. So, Amberley, tell us about the business.
So myself and Leah, amongst 3 other graduate students at the University of Guelph, are working to get kids excited about eating fruits and veggies in a new format, which is always a challenge, as I'm sure we all know. And
it's not just kids, by the way.
Oh, yes, not just kids, everyone.
I saw what you were reading, John.
So we're actually developing basically a fruit and vegetable puree, applesauce, which will be served in a convenient container, which will be like a yogurt tube, except with packs of fruits and veggies. And we're really excited to be doing this because there's a huge need for this in schools across Ontario. And based on my previous time working for the Ontario Student Nutrition Program, we noticed that, given the stringent guidelines to serve food in schools and also meeting the convenience factor, being able to have this portable fruit and veggie tube was a way to get kids excited about eating this fun snack, and also helping at our local economy, as we're going to be using local fruits and veggies from Ontario, which are naturally imperfect, meaning either misshapen or for some reason not making it to the grocery store, despite it being perfectly fine and delicious. So we're really excited to be venturing on this new business.
Naturally imperfect is a great expression. I think you've also described it as asymmetrical peaches, the ones that aren't quite yes. Don't make the cut at Whole Foods, but they still taste great. Leah, give us a sense of how this helps your studies. You're in your master's, Amberley's doing her PhD. How does this fit in?
Yeah, so this is it's been a really interesting experience. It's definitely an extension of our studies. So we come from very academic lenses, and this gives us the opportunity to really apply the skills that we've learned and to develop new ones for which you wouldn't all have the opportunity otherwise. I mean, it's not every day that you get to the opportunity to just start a business. So, so that's been really amazing. And also just learning how to take kind of a very large, broad conceptual idea and break it down into exactly what is needed to make that a reality. And that's been a really interesting process so far.
And Evan, I can see how this benefits these two remarkable people, and maybe it'll create a fantastic business in the process. How does it fit into what you're trying to build at Arrell?
Well, we're not trying to throw the baby out with the bathwater, I should hasten to add. Each of these students that are part of the Arrell Food Institute are enrolled in their own traditional postgraduate, master's or PhD degrees, and they're doing their regular theses and getting that cutting-edge scientific and social scientific training that the workforce demands. One day a week, because of the generous grant from the Arrell Family Foundation, with leveraged money from the federal government, we can take these students and workshop them into a workplace relevant training experience. And really what I'm trying to do is create that value added proposition for the traditional graduate student experience, get the regular thesis, and the cutting edge training, and then with me and the Arrell Food Institute, do that workplace relevant, team-based, interdisciplinary work for a non-academic partner.
And Leah, maybe I can go back to you as someone coming from STEM. We hear a lot about STEM. You spend a good chunk of your time in the lab focused on things like plankton. Talk a bit about the skills that you're developing in this program and how those help both your science but also what you're looking to do with your career.
I think one of the greatest skills that I've been able to gain from this experience and that I'm going to bring forward is general communication skills. So I've become a big proponent that everyone should really take a marketing class and should take business classes because you get a lot of academics who are so good at what they're doing. They're so good in their field. They're amazingly knowledgeable, but they can't sell their ideas to other people because they can't communicate what they're doing and why it's important. And so being able to have the ability to communicate those ideas, I think it gives you greater impact and gives you greater reach. And so I think that that's really important, not just for academia, not just for business, but in all aspects of life, just to be able to communicate that with the people around you.
I think you're pretty good on that front.
So
that's fantastic. But you're also developing this in a team environment, and we were just hearing about the importance of team-based learning and how everyone on the team has to, one day be a leader, other days be a follower or just a strong team member. Amberley, give us a bit of insight into the team you've got around you and how you're working together.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we're a group of 5, and what's interesting about our team is that we come from across all disciplines. So part of the team dynamic is really translating that knowledge to not only work together, but then broader as united front. So a lot of, I feel like, our work is not only synthesizing with our team members, but then at other times, really taking the front and leading. So Leah and I are on the business development side, and we've been co-leading that segment, but then we have 3 other extremely talented women working in the lab with us, one of which is here today, Karthika. And it's been wonderful to see different skills crop up, and just being open and being very, working across disciplines has brought so many different adventures that we didn't anticipate, or extra skill sets. And to give one small example is we had Andrea on our team who in a group meeting said, I actually took a packaging development course. And I was like, well, that's brilliant. And before embarking on this venture, we had no idea. So it's been an amazing team dynamic, and really getting out of our disciplines and working between disciplines has really enhanced that knowledge translation part of our work.
What do you figure is going to be the biggest challenge in building this business?
Well, as I said before, this has really been a discovery process, so sometimes we don't know all of the knowns, or the unknowns are still there. But I think, the biggest challenge, it's hard to pinpoint, but I think probably just really knowing the ins and outs of distribution will be a challenge for us. We have some great partners that are really excited to get our product out there and are willing to help us. But there's just a lot of unknowns as new entrepreneurs onto the scene.
Yeah. And I think just to add to that, definitely knowing the ins and outs of processing and of food distribution is a huge aspect that we're still learning a lot about. But I think also just maintaining that balance between understanding the minutia and keeping an eye on the prize and keeping an eye on what the vision is, and how we each all contribute to that vision and how we can play to our strengths to be able to bring that together as a collective.
Yeah, I'm just going to give a bit of a shout out to the University of Guelph here, because the challenges at doing this sort of thing are enormous and multifaceted. And one of the benefits of having this sort of experimental space at the university is that you can draw on the resources of the university. So half of their team went into our Food Technology Innovation Center to develop the actual physical product. And the other half of their team enrolled in our accelerator program to develop the skills of business development. And so what we're really trying to do, and I think the value proposition of the university to society, is that we can create that experimental ecosystem that covers off the range of skills required and then gives people that sort of that full portfolio experience that they need.
Yeah, and this is a great example of why universities are a wonderful place, not the only place, but a great place to nurture, incubate, develop businesses. We see this at MIT, Stanford, and at many great schools.
And the University of Guelph.
And University of Guelph. Because you're building the Silicon Valley of food, and that leads to the next question. Because Evan, you and I have talked a lot over the years about Canada's opportunity to be a global food power, and you're working with some of the country's biggest companies, with Maple Leaf, who you're speaking to today, and Loblaws, as well as a lot of farmers across the country. Curious what kind of skills you think we need to make Canada that global food power.
Well, I mean, we just have to keep fully in our minds that the same technologies that brought us the internet, they're just now being applied in our farms and on our barns and in our food processing centers. And that means all the stuff we've talked about for the last 40 minutes: cutting-edge analytics, coding, data processing, project management, interdisciplinary work. It's that extraordinarily fractured but very exciting skills revolution. And frankly, given the combined effects of population growth that's driving our demand for food up globally, and climate change that's going to make food harder to produce, Canada is going to play a key role in feeding the future, both in terms of feeding the food, but also producing the skills and the technologies that other countries will use to feed the future. So I think this is extremely exciting, but it requires, to quote David, it requires us to be in charge of the change.
And among the changes that we have to make, and are already underway in large parts of the country, is in our education system and helping our schools and learning institutions move faster. And Leah and Amberley, I want to turn to you with just a minute or so left to get a sense, because you're in the belly of the beast in the campus, to get your perspective on what you would like to see change in our approach to education.
So for me, I would just like to see more programs like the one Leah and I are experiencing at the Arrell Food Institute, just because from personal experience, when I first got out of my master's degree, being able to work in a small consulting firm really enabled me to just get down into a whole variety of projects, which required many different skill sets. Some research, when applying to grants, and some interpersonal skills when, say, leading a focus group. And I feel that this program offers that same, diversity of skill sets. So I would just love to see this amplified and expanded across. As you know, there are too many, I think, youth coming out of programs who are underemployed, unfortunately, in the summer. Have great skill sets to offer, but don't have the opportunities. So that's why I'm really excited about the Future Launch program.
That's a great message. Leah?
Yeah, and I would have to agree. I think that more skills-based learning programs are essential to be bringing more young people into the workforce and to make that transition from their undergraduate or graduate studies faster and easier. And I think that what we need more of is really what we're seeing now is from our own programming and from increased co-op programs like we're seeing in Peller Estates. And it's really exciting being back in school and being able to see these opportunities, being able to see them coming up and become more abundant in academia and in schools.
So we've got a couple of deputy ministers here today and leaders of universities and colleges from different parts of the country. So I think that message is going to be heard loud and clear and taken back. It's a fantastic message. You folks have got lots more to share, and if you want to hear it, you can listen to a special podcast with them, which you can access through iTunes or SoundCloud. Just search for RBC Disruptors. Evan, Amberley, Leah, congratulations on building the Arrell Food Institute, getting it off the ground. Best of luck with your company and also your careers. It's really inspiring to know that you're going to lead us into the 2020s. And thanks for spending time with us this morning. We're now going to turn to our next guest, final guest, St. Elizabeth Healthcare. Thanks.
St. Elizabeth is a national healthcare organization. We make over 6 million visits with our 9,000 mobile workers throughout the country. We provide care to people in their home, educational services and research. The more we're able to recruit people who are digitally fluent in this space, just allows us to free up some of our orientation time and also some of our skill development time.
My name is FELICIA KONTOPIDIS and I'm a registered nurse. Nursing has been an amazing world for me. You have to be able to deal with the most urgent priority. You can't just do a treatment and leave. You have to deal with, yes, the clinical, but also the psychosocial.
Technology is changing both the environments within which our staff work. Now they're doing things in a virtual way. They're filling a digital platform. And then additionally, they have to learn how to interact and communicate differently for society at large.
Shirley and Felicia, thanks so much for, there we've got some light. Shirley and Felicia, thanks for spending time with us this morning. And thank you for all you're doing out there in the world to make Canada a healthier, happier, better place. We're going to hear some interesting stuff about the realities of home care and how people work with technology on the front lines of what Felicia does every day in a great diversity of homes, certainly around our city, and hear from Shirley, who leads the country's largest home care operation, 9,000 people strong, making the country better. Let's start with you, Shirley, though, in your own skills journey. You're a trained nurse. Curious how nursing has changed and what skills are needed today versus when you were in school.
That was just yesterday.
Yes.
So just yesterday, when I was trained as a nurse, a lot of what we did was really tell people about their conditions. And we held all of the information and many of those answers. But with information, communication, technology, that world has changed. And people are much more informed. So we're not directing anybody. We're coaching, we're guiding. We're not telling anybody about their disease. We're sometimes translating it and interpreting it for them. And we're certainly not providing care to people. We're providing together care in a partnership. So when I look at those practice patterns that have changed, the skills that are very different now, or let's just say they're much more focused, are incredible communication skills. Also, amazing problem-solving skills. And lastly, but not because it's so important, but it's a critical component, is digital fluency and literacy. Because mobile workers, just logistically need to feel comfortable with the technology and various mobile devices, but it also is so critical to how they communicate and interact with patients and their families.
See, it's interesting to hear the similarities. It's probably true whether you're a bank or a winery or a home care provider. The customer now has this and feels like they have a universe of knowledge in their hands and therefore in their brains. And you've got to work with that. Felicia, you're out there every day working with folks who probably feel they know as much as you do because of this device. But I want to share a story that you've shared with us on our podcast about what got you into nursing. You mentioned a picture of you as a kid with a stethoscope and a teddy bear. And that's probably the quintessential image that we all have of the healthcare professional, the care provider. And curious what skills you've drawn that are different from that may be surprising.
I think initially when I went into nursing, it was very focused around patient care, meeting many needs of the patient. And when I started working in home and community care, the world was very, very different. It required a lot of skills. It constantly being questioned by patients, especially as society's changing, and they have more information, they have more access to research, to tools. They're asking very critical questions, so we're always on our toes. So it's actually not giving them the information, it's coaching them how to be independent. It's coaching my colleagues with the experience that I've gained in the many skills that are required to support patients. It's being able to transfer that knowledge. It's also requiring a lot of strategy, prioritizing, because when you're caring for people in the community, you know, you're having to always come up with a backup plan. Things arise in your day, and people are depending on you. So I think that's very important to be able to navigate through.
So maybe you can give us a bit of a sense of what you go through in your day. You're out there visiting 6, 8, 10 cases a day. Probably most people here know what it's like to see someone like you walk through the door. Either they're ill and at home, or they're caring for someone who is at home, and they don't appreciate what's going through your head and how you're trying to strategize as you're walking through the door. Maybe you can give us a bit of an insight into what you see walking through that door.
A typical day would be, you know, you get your schedule and you have no idea who the patient is aside from, you know, their demographics and their actual diagnosis, and you show up at the door. They're not always answering the door because they can't, so you invite yourself in. And, you know, an example of some of my early days in the community is just following sort of a pathway, just enough to allow me to fit through, because, you know, the whole room was piled with newspapers from the floor to the ceiling. And I find my patient at the other end of the room, and they're waiting for me. I'm probably their only visitor for the day, and their only contact for the day. And they're basically in an area that is surrounded by stuff. And I'm having to, you know, sort of just plan out how I'm going to focus on this patient, not just to change their bandage, but to make sure that they're comfortable and that they don't think that I'm judging them. So, you know, I introduce myself and I kindly ask them permission if I can reshuffle everything from above the microwave so I can put it in the microwave and place my bag on, because, you know, there's also other concerns that we have to be on alert for, you know, whether it be, you know, bed bugs, whether it be stuff toppling over, you know, affecting us being able to support our patient. So this particular patient, you know, within minutes, I'm developing a rapport with them, and they're, you know, just so you understand, is they're shuffling from their limited area where they lie down to the only other area where I can care for them, which is on the toilet seat, and it's not even in a particular room. So all the while I'm maintaining composure, talking to them, engaging with them, all the while I'm also bandaging their legs. So I'm not just a nurse, I'm a caregiver, I'm a shoulder to lean on, I'm a social worker, and I'm also an occupational therapist, so.
So when our report talks about humans wanted, that's a great illustration. It's incredible. Surely, a lot of stuff there that isn't taught in school, probably can't be taught in school. How do you develop that in your workforce?
Well, you know, a lot of what we've come to realize with Felicia's description of the world is that, you know, coaching is more how we've changed. And how we approach both the practice of care with patients, and also our whole organization is about coaching one another. Because learning, as we've all discovered, is very much connected. There's a real natural connection with learning and active experience and interactive experiences. And I think what we've done with training and education is look at how do we teach the skills for coaching. And those are very much human skills, because they're about engaging, establishing a relationship, how best to help people design their own goals and their own plan of care, which is very different than how we functioned previously. And why this is so important is because there's going to be greater success. We're going to create better value for them if they help us determine what they're looking for. And all of the skills related to human interaction, upskilling, focusing on different ways for conflict resolution, situational awareness. You know, pilots talk a lot about situational awareness. I go, you don't have anything to worry about compared to our life in the healthcare world. And there's a lot of interesting analogies. So an organization is pressured to certainly deal with, and I think, Dave, you spoke about this, the realities of today and the skills that are needed, but to look into the future and say, how do we prepare our talent for the future and make sure we refine those skills?
And one of our challenges as a society, and it's certainly true in your profession, is we're still credentials focused. And a lot of what we measure and you have to hire for and you're regulated for good reasons are not the things that Felicia was just describing that make a great healthcare worker. How do you navigate that, Shirley, as you're trying to move beyond credentials in a regulated sector?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think at the frontline level for health professionals, I now look at credentials as the minimal requirement. And we've really spent some time to figure out what are the competencies and the skills that will help our home care professionals thrive in the environment, in the very interesting environment that's been described. And so we begin to test those competencies and those skills. And they're, you know, related to, firstly, is there a comfort to work independently? It's very, very different in the home and community world than it is in the hospital world. So can they do that? Can they multitask? Now with traffic and driving and all of the devices and calling people and checking in, absolutely critical to have that component. And, you know, looking at, you know, also incredible organizational skills that typically as clinicians, you really don't look, am I organized? Can I multitask? Can I do these things? You look at how well do I understand the pathophysiology. So we're bringing in and testing for those competencies well above and beyond the credentials. Another thing we're doing at the leadership level, which I am really excited about, is what we call sort of talent disruption. And I think all of you will be, because most people in healthcare think we have to bring in to leadership the nurse, the doctor, the therapist who has moved into management. And I can say now at our senior table, we have about 4 people that have been brought in who had no healthcare experience whatsoever, let alone clinical background, engineers, lawyers, people who are marketing gurus in consumer goods. They are now opening up our eyes and minds to what can happen in the health space, and we're helping position them for future opportunities in the health space. So everyone here is interested in all these other industries. We are open to recruitment.
Felicia, we've got just a couple of minutes left. I wonder if you can reflect briefly on the sort of skills as you look forward into the decade ahead, your own career, as well as the evolution of St. Elizabeth and home care generally. What skills do you think are going to become more and more valuable?
The ability, again, we touched upon coaching. I've been able to sort of get a head start on that, reprogramming my brain so that I'm able to navigate and walk through an in-home scenario and coach a nurse how to be excellent. Additionally, I've been exposed to new platforms that engage patients in communicating virtually with a nurse, and I've been able to provide support to patients. And again, through these new exposures, I've been able to work with nurses, patients, and caregivers in the home to bring new technology to support them and enhance the care that they're already getting. So I think it's great that St. Liz has invested in me, and it's an expectation for me to transfer that knowledge and help everybody else get on board, because as people are changing, society's changing, we all need to really change. So
that's great. Shirley, just the last word to you briefly. You're trying to take an organization of 9,000 people into the future, lots of technology all around you, great opportunities. What's the single biggest challenge?
Healthcare is a monolith. It is a juggernaut. It's been really hard for healthcare to keep up with the pace of consumers and what's changing in the digital age. What's been very interesting for St. Eliz, and we've had a great opportunity in the home care space, where we have been pushed to really understand what consumers are all about, and everything now related to smart homes. You know, we now say we are creating smart caregivers, and we're using a whole different digital platform that will be part of how we monitor people in their home environment. So what's interesting is I think we finally have figured out we have to create the future and future-proof the organization and our talent. And the challenge is going to be, I hope everyone else in the healthcare space can wake up and see that this is critical, or else we're going to have a huge wake-up call for talent and skills and huge growth, but not the time and the runway to develop those effectively.
I sense we have another topic for Future Disruptors there, so you're invited
Future
back for that.
Disruptors.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this conversation. If you want to hear more about St. Elizabeth and the great journey that Shirley and Felicia and their colleagues are on, we have a podcast recording with them that you can get on iTunes or SoundCloud. Shirley, Felicia, thank you for spending time with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for all you're doing out in our communities. To our Facebook audience, thanks for joining us. Please follow us on social media for details about the next RBC Disruptors. Until then, have a great day.